there's no point looking for a parcel of land unless you know fundamentally what you're going to do with it. So having an architect available to look at a concept with you is critical. Town planner will give some input to that. Your due diligence, if there's a bunch of trees you can't move, there's some koala habitat, whatever it might be, environmental, you might have some contamination sitting on the corner of a site, whatever it might be, that'll feed in. And your concept design then will feed into, generally at this point in time, we're talking about going into your static feasibility. So you've got your preliminary feasibility, which we're going to be using later this morning. We don't use a concept design, but when you've looked at your preliminary and you go, yes, this is okay, at that point in time, you've got to really start looking at what can I actually put on that site. So this becomes important. Planner, what can you develop on that site? What are your constraints? Where are your opportunities as well? Various different, the legislation, again, you look at your local, your state, national, how that might affect you. Rezoning, we're not going to talk about rezoning, but rezoning has massive value uplift attached to it, assuming you're rezoning to a higher and better use. It also has a lot of risk attached to it as well. The appeal rights, if you get rejected on your rezoning, are exceptionally limited compared to a DA or a permit where you can take it to the next level and challenge it. Survey, we did that one before, didn't we? Environmental, so contamination, threatened species, native landscape. Feasibility, is it viable? Ultimately, that's all we're looking at when we go through our feasibility, is the viability aspect of it. So high level feaso, static, and the cash flow. Then we talk about sensitivity analysis. So this is the what if scenario. So even in a high level feasibility, you've got to contemplate what if. So we always look at our high level, we always go in with what we believe is a realistic number. So we use realistic numbers wherever we do, and then with our sensitivity analysis we say, well, what if we can't achieve that revenue? Or what if our construction cost is higher? What if it takes longer? So we have to look at different events because things happen and because we don't know what's going to happen over the next 2 years. So those sorts of things, we look at sensitivity analysis. And this is really interesting, is when you come to this last statement here, is your proposed development still financially viable when you look at all those sensitivity analysis? If something goes wrong, whether it be in the economy or in your projections, right, you've got to get out of it. It's really easy to get into a property development project. All you do is buy a site. Getting out of it's the hard part, selling your stock or whatever. Look at all the DAs that are currently for sale. These are all people who are having trouble getting out. So getting out of a development when the market crashes, or when your costs go through the roof, or environmental issues, are worse than you thought, or you can't get the yield that you thought, or there's trees and there's koalas that you didn't think were there, or whatever it might be. You might have this Siberian wader bird flying over the building at a particular time of year and you're too high. So, God only knows. Whatever those issues are, right, is it still viable? You've got to look at all these things. This is what we're going to be looking at a little bit later on. It's the high level feasibility. So we'll be using this as an Excel spreadsheet. We'll have all these different things. In the middle of the screen here, the profit and risk margin here, I've got 25%. A lot of people go, oh, 25%, that's a lot of money. And you go, okay, well, it's $3.8 million out of a project whose total development cost is 15. Well, it's 3 million on top of 15. You go, that's a lot of money. It's nearly $4 million bucks. Wow, I'd love to be making that money. And so would a developer. A developer would love to be making that money as well. But hey, he's got to run a business out of that. So he's going to look at 10 sites. He's going to spend 200,000 bucks looking for sites, right? And if he finds this one and acquires this one, right, 200 grand just disappears out of that like nothing. And that might have taken him 6 months or 12 months. And so his business may have operated and might have cost him $400,000 over that period of time with staff. So suddenly we're down to 3.2 million. So it's just chum, chum, chum. And then when it's finished, this might be a 2-year project. He's got to pay his overheads for 2 years out of that as well. So there's another 2 years of overheads. There might be another $800,000. So this number's starting to get small. It's starting to get really, really small. So people think it's big. Now, I'll also tell you that a lot of the major developers out there at the moment, this is 16%. Right? So they're not making massive amounts of money. So 16 to 20% is sort of what the market's doing. Whenever I do these sorts of things, I do 25. I will never put under 25% in here because this is high level. There's so many variables in this. So when I do the next level, which is a static feasibility, then that might have a little bit more information. A static feasibility is just the other spreadsheet. So if I just go back, static feaso is this, but instead of having apartments, 37 apartments at an average size of 75, I'm going to split that up and say that we've got 10 one-bedders at this, and we'll split.